Hello everyone, welcome to Unit 4, the Executive Branch. This is going to be broken up over a few videos, and we're going to start with the powers, requirements, and roles of the President, so let's just jump right into it. Now, the U.S. Constitution, Article 2, covers the Executive Branch and the President. Their requirements, some of the roles they have, some of their powers, and different things. We're going to cover all of that, and the first thing I want to start with is that second paragraph. In the Constitution, Article 2, Section 3, they have a State of the Union address that is a requirement from the President to Congress. Now, this is where the President will present with Congress their legislative priorities, what they want to happen. Tradition, though, has shaped it to how it is today. The fact that it's televised, there's a lot of different ways that it can be looked at. It's just, in the Constitution, emphasize that they need to have a State of the Union. So, we're going to watch this little video. It kind of gives a breakdown of how people react, why people react the way they do. So sit back, relax, and let's learn a little bit about the State of the Union.
State of the Union addresses can be a type of partisan Pilates for some. For others, it can be a direct ticket to becoming an internet meme. Behind many of these reactions is a careful calculation, and we break it down. You won't find many Democrats jumping out of their seats for President Trump. Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia is the exception. He's sitting right in the front, and that's likely not a coincidence. Here he is again applauding Trump's jab at those who kneel for the national anthem, and again after Trump mentions rising wages. It's a re-election year for Manchin, and he's in a state that overwhelmingly voted for Trump. Now he's apparently showing support for a president from the opposing party. Let's go to the other side of the aisle.
We repealed the core of the disastrous Obamacare. The individual mandate is now gone. Thank heaven.
Did you catch that? Overwhelming excitement. Except for Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. Last summer, Murkowski played a key role to squash efforts to repeal the Affordable Care Act.
Working with the Senate, we are appointing judges who will interpret the Constitution as written, including a great new Supreme Court justice.
President Trump threw a compliment right at Neil Gorsuch, but he didn't take the bait.
In the history of our country.
Did you notice who stood? Senator Joe Manchin. But justices must make careful and largely coordinated choices about what statements are uncontroversial enough to warrant applause.
We can achieve absolutely anything. America is grieving for you. Kenton Stacy would have died if it were not for Justin's selfless love.
Another group that attempts to play it down the middle, the military officials. Like the justices, they must decide what is partisan platitude and what is not.
And I will not stop until our veterans are properly taken care of, which has been my promise to them from the very beginning of this great journey. We must modernize and rebuild our nuclear arsenal, hopefully never having to use it, but making it so strong and so powerful that it will deter any acts of aggression by any other nation or anyone else.
Watch as they hesitate.
That the coalition to defeat ISIS has liberated very close to 100% of the territory.
To clap or not to clap? In a deeply divided Congress, applause or silence can send a powerful message.
All right, so hopefully you know a little bit more about the State of the Union if you ever get a chance to watch it. Even just going back, President Trump's, President Obama's, President Bush's, President Clinton. If you just look for the highlight afterward, it is about half as long if you actually want to listen to everything they say, because there's so much clapping and standing up and sitting down. The State of the Union today takes a very long time for actually what the president physically says. There's also a lot of, besides just the legislative priorities they bring up, they also have certain guests that come on that they want to emphasize that sit in the balconies, and they always do that. Usually there's always going to be one or two service members that are getting honored or in some way like that. So, now let's look at the requirements. According to the Constitution, they have to have a minimum age of 35. They need to be a natural-born citizen. So compared to the House of Representatives and the Senate, where you can be a citizen of another country, then become a U.S. citizen, and then join the House of Representatives or the Senate, to be president, you need to be a natural-born citizen. They did write in a clause to this at the very beginning because, as a new country, not everybody was necessarily born in the United States at the end of the 17 and early 1800s. So they had a clause in there at the very beginning so that presidents didn't necessarily have to be born stateside in the foundation. Then the 22nd Amendment came on. No more than 2 4-year terms. That is all they can do. Before that, it was, and we'll get into legacies and traditions, but President Washington only served 2 terms, and those were both 4-year terms. And he probably could have won a 3rd term if he would have ran, but he decided not to. And everybody did that out of tradition and respect for him until FDR. And then FDR won actually 4 terms. And then after his passing in office, they decided to make the 22nd Amendment, which limited that to 2 terms. Needs to be a resident of the United States for at least 14 years. Now, what does that mean with regards to natural-born citizen? Well, just because you're a natural-born citizen doesn't mean you necessarily needed to have lived in the United States recently. So, as long as they have spent 14 years within the U.S., and usually this is also going to be very closely tied to living in the U.S. before the presidential election, then they will meet the requirements. All right, and now let's go over to the powers that the president has. In the Constitution, they are allowed to veto legislation, which we've already covered in the legislative branch. They can command the military. They are called the commander-in-chief. They are allowed to engage with foreign leaders for a variety of different things, make treaties, work on relations. They can also appoint ambassadors and federal judges. So these are powers directly given in the Constitution that they have. But working with Congress is very important for the president. A good relationship with Congress gives more power to the president. The reason being, federal judges, different positions in, say, the leader of the CIA or the FBI needs to get approved by Congress. So, if the president respects Congress, they work together. If Congress is the same party as the president, a lot of what he wants to do in his powers will get approved and passed much more quickly. Executive order. This is another given power in the Constitution. It is a rule issued by the president that has a force of law. It is not technically a law because only the legislative branch is allowed to pass laws. But they must be related in some way to powers given in the Constitution or delegated to him or her. So, they cannot make an executive order that has nothing to do with what seems to be their structure and their powers in the Constitution. So, Truman, he's going to racially integrate the armed forces in 1948. It wasn't law. They had in World War II. You've probably learned about some of the different segregated units, platoons, companies. But after 1948, he forced racial integration. Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation as an executive order freeing all the slaves. Eisenhower put Arkansas National Guard under control of under the federal government to protect the students, the Little Rock Nine, if you remember that from your American history class. And FDR placed Japanese Americans in internment camps in World War II. These are all related to, in some way, most of these are related to military powers because as Commander-in-Chief. But anytime they sign in executive orders, and presidents sign executive orders a lot for a lot of different reasons. Usually it's not covered because a lot of what it is just to get something done real quick. They don't have to go through Congress, all that bureaucracy or anything like that. They can just do what they need to and move on. What about inherent powers? What are inherent powers? These are powers not described in the Constitution, but have been claimed by the president. So before the 22nd Amendment, presidents only served 2 terms out of tradition and respect for Washington. Like I said before, FDR is going to change that. That's not mentioned in the Constitution before this, but they just say we're just going to do 2. Acquiring more land. This came up as a problem. When the U.S. wanted to start expanding, they looked and they said, well, wait, it's not in the Constitution who's allowed to buy more land. Is it the judicial branch, the executive branch, the legislative branch? How do we do it? They looked at it and they decided we're going to go with the executive branch. So the power of buying land now resides within the executive powers. Having a cabinet. These are the advisors to the president. These are a very important pick if you watch during the presidential election. They'll all, depending on if they're the incumbent or the person running against, they're going to announce who their cabinet is, and cabinets can have a lot of influence. If people don't like or don't think the people in their cabinet are going to be doing a good job, will not be good advisors, that might incentivize them to not vote for that person running for president. Washington, though, is going to be the one that starts it all. And he's going to have, famously, Hamilton and Jefferson, 2 very different ideologies about government in his cabinet because he wanted to have competing views and different ideas. That is part of the history behind cabinet, is to have people that maybe not necessarily agree with you, but can bring something to the table. Some cabinets are much more yes men type cabinets where they just agree with the president, but not always. They can have competing ideas sometimes. Just depends on what the president wants. An executive privilege and impeachment. Executive privilege is the right of the president and other high-ranking executive officers to withhold communications from Congress or the courts. This has been claimed by a lot of presidents for a lot of different reasons, but this is partly in place to be a check and a balance. If Congress could access everything that the executive branch is doing and saying, it does give a lot of weight and power to the legislative branch. So to kind of keep a little bit of a separation between the executive branch and the legislative branch, they have this executive privilege. Now, that does not mean that certain things are forever and always barred from going to the courts or Congress. If there is a serious reason to get a hold of it, and some reasons might be looking into impeachment, then there's a process going through the courts, acquiring all of that, getting redacted, different things that it can go through. And then we get to impeachment. Now, impeachment is to accuse a public official of misconduct in office. Now, public official. We usually relate impeachment to the president because that's usually how we always talk about it, but it could be any public official responsible for misconduct in office. That's pretty much what it means. For the president, reasons of impeachment: treason, bribery. Those are both very self-explanatory. Are you going against the country? Are you accepting a bribe for some reason? The third option, though, high crimes and misdemeanors. That is a little bit more gray and a little bit more complicated. What does it mean for a high crime? What does it mean for a misdemeanor of an impeachable offense? That is something that's been questioned for a while. So we're going to go over to Ron's office hours, and we're going to listen to him talk about some impeachment.